Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in Freshman English. I'm with you in your hymnals on page 572, 573, and then I'm going to jump over to page 577. We're going to be looking at Harlod Courlander and George Herzog's talk. Now, let's just say this out loud so there's no confusion. Both of the two titles that are being compared here have the word talk in it. We've already looked at Gary Soto's The Talk, a conversation between two young 12-year-old boys about their future and their life and all of that. This is a text called Talk. We're going to, however, compare these two titles as works of humorous writing. This, write it down though in your notes, is what we call a folk tale that will enjoin the hyperbole and understatement that we were already speaking about before. Again, remember, hyperbole at 2b. Put this down. Hyperbole is exaggeration. It's raining cats and dogs does not mean that it actually is raining cats and dogs. It just means it's raining hard, right? I'm so hungry I could eat a horse is a colloquial saying, but it's also an example of hyperbole. It's not like you could actually eat an entire horse. You see what we're saying? Understatement is its opposite. You understate something to actually overstate it or to make a point, okay? Now, again, let's go to the information on page 573. The big question, finally, one last time, is knowledge the same as understanding or wisdom? Let's meet our two authors. Harlod Courlander, see your dates, 1908 to 1996, and George Herzog, 1901 to 1983. Let's play this game now of biography. Talk is an Ashanti folk tale, so you want to write that down. An Ashanti folktale. The Ashanti live in what is now the West African country of Ghana. So write this down. The story, the folk tale that we're about to mess with comes from West Africa, okay? The country of Ghana. They have a history that dates back centuries. Talk is retold by Harlod Courlander and George Herzog. Now let's just say this out loud then. These two guys do not invent this story. This story is thousands of years old. It's just that they were told the story and then they translate the story and give the story to you as a folk tale. All right? Courlander studied history and folklore of African and other world cultures. He wrote more than 35 fiction and nonfiction books inspired by these stories. Okay? And George Herzog was born in Budapest, Hungary, and he pioneered the study of the cultural aspects of music. He also taught linguistics and anthropology and published books on folk music. Now let's go to this story itself. It's again called Talk. I'm going to give you 2 points of emphasis. Write these down. 1, the first thing I'm going to ask you is in this story, what do you find at all humorous, if at all, about this story? So that's the first thing. What do you find humorous about this story? Is there anything funny about this story? Okay. By the way, put a note to yourself. It might be ironic. Let's go there. It might be ironic. Number 2. Okay, so it's funny or it's humorous, but our second question is, what's the point of the story? It's a folk tale. So it's supposed to have some kind of ultimate meaning. I'm going to challenge you. What is the ultimate meaning of this story called Talk? All right, so follow along. It's a brief folk tale, and let's just enjoy the story. Here we go.
Talk by Harlod Courlander and George Herzog. Once, not far from the city of Accra on the Gulf of Guinea, a countryman went out to his garden to dig up some yams to take to market. While he was digging, one of the yams said to him, "Well, at last you're here. You never weeded me, but now you come around with your digging stick. Go away and leave me alone." The farmer turned around
578.
and looked at his cow in amazement. The cow was chewing her cud and looking at him. "Did you say something?" he asked. The cow kept on chewing and said nothing, but the man's dog spoke up. "It wasn't the cow who spoke to you," the dog said. "It was the yam. The yam says leave him alone." The man became angry because his dog had never talked before, and he didn't like his tone besides. So he took his knife and cut a branch from a palm tree to whip his dog. Just then the palm tree said, "Put that branch down." The man was getting very upset about the way things were going, and he started to throw the palm branch away. But the palm branch said, "Man, put me down softly." He put the branch down gently on a stone, and the stone said, "Hey, take that thing off me!" This was enough, and the frightened farmer started to run for his village. On the way, he met a fisherman, going the other way with a fish trap on his head. "What's the hurry?" the fisherman asked. "My yam said, 'Leave me alone.' Then the dog said, 'Listen to what the yam says.' When I went to whip the dog with a palm branch, the tree said, 'Put that branch down.' Then the palm branch said, 'Do it softly.' Then the stone said, 'Take that thing off me.'" "Is that all?" the man with the fish trap asked. "Is that so frightening?" "Well," the man's fish trap said, "did he take it off the stone?" "Wah!" the fisherman shouted. He threw the fish trap on the ground and began to run with the farmer. And on the trail, they met a weaver with a bundle of cloth on his head. "Where are you going in such a rush?" he asked them. "My yam said, 'Leave me alone,'" the farmer said. "The dog said, 'Listen to what the yam says.' The tree said, 'Put that branch down.' The branch said, 'Do it softly.' And the stone said, 'Take that thing off me.' And then," the fisherman continued, "the fish trap said, 'Did he take it off?'" "That's nothing to get excited about," the weaver said. "No reason at all." "Oh, yes it is," his bundle of cloth said. "If it happened to you, you'd run too." "Wah!" the weaver shouted. He threw his bundle on the trail and started running with the other men. They came panting to the ford in the river and found a man bathing. "Are you chasing a gazelle?" he asked them. The first man said breathlessly, "My yam talked at me, and it said, 'Leave me alone.' And my dog said, 'Listen to your yam.' And when I cut myself a branch, the tree said, 'Put that branch down.' And the branch said, 'Do it softly.' And the stone said, 'Take that thing off me.'" The fisherman panted, "And my trap said, 'Did he?'" The weaver wheezed, "And my bundle of cloth said, 'You'd run too.'" "Is that why you're running?" the man in the river asked. "Well, wouldn't you run if you were in their position?" the river said. The man jumped out of the water and began to run with the others. They ran down the main street of the village to the house of the chief. The chief's servants brought his stool out, and he came and sat on it to listen to their complaints. The men began to recite their troubles. "I went out to my garden to dig yams," the farmer said, waving his arms. "Then everything began to talk. My yam said, 'Leave me alone.' My dog said, 'Pay attention to your yam.' The tree said, 'Put that branch down.' The branch said, 'Do it softly.' And the stone said, 'Take it off me.' And my fish trap said,
Top of 580.
Did he take it off?" the fisherman said. "And my cloth said, 'You'd run too,' the weaver said. "And the river said the same," the bather said hoarsely, his eyes bulging. The chief listened to them patiently, but he couldn't refrain from scowling. "Now, this is really a wild story," he said at last. "You'd better all go back to your work before I punish you for disturbing the peace." So the men went away, and the chief shook his head and mumbled to himself, "Nonsense like that upsets the community." "Fantastic, isn't it?" his stool said. "Imagine a talking yam."
Now, your textbook company asks a very interesting question on page 580. I want to go there really quickly. Do you see literary analysis, humorous writing? Watch this question, and I think this will help us to get into this text quickly. How would this folktale be different if it ended with the line, nonsense like that upsets the community, as opposed to what happens where you have the talking stool and then it just kind of, the story just kind of continues. Jot down, what are your thoughts about that? Why is it a fascinating story that the way it ends is the way it began, with everything talking? Let's pause for a moment and I'll ask you this question really quickly. Why do you think the title of this folk tale is Talk? Go ahead and jot that one down. Why? Why is it called Talk, do you think? And I told you we were going to ask two questions, and I want you to write about them before we talk about it. No pun intended, right? What do you think is humorous about this story? It's a folk tale. What do you think is humorous about this story? And by the way, here at 3B in a little bit, we're going to ask about why some things that are funny to you are not funny to other people, and why some things that are considered humorous, for example, to prior generations, are not funny to you. Okay, we'll ask that question later, all right? And finally, okay, so now you know what the story is about. What do you think is the point of a folk tale like this? Can you come up with any quote-unquote the moral to the tale is? And jot that one down really quick, already at 3A, or at 2A. What do you think is the point of a story like this? All right, let's summarize quickly the text. As all folk tales do, and by the way, we have these examples in the American tradition as well as the African tradition. All cultures seem to have these kinds of stories. Let's say two things about them. One, expect the unexpected. Talking yams, talking fish traps, talking stools. Expect the unexpected, right? And you can already at 3A name stories that you're familiar with where there are talking, and then you fill in the blank. Talking animals are, of course, a huge part of all kinds of stories. And for those of you, for example, who grew up going to Sunday school in a Christian church, you know the story, and in a Jewish synagogue, you know the story in the very beginning of the book of Genesis where a man and a woman are in a garden named Eden, and guess what? There's a talking snake there. So we have these kinds of stories. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have talking snakes. We have all different kinds of talking animals. So, we have this talking going on, right? And then you have the repetition of the story. Notice it. When the yam says knock it off, he has to run and find somebody, and then both of them have to tell their story, and then a third joins and they have to tell their story, and it just keeps going and going and going, culminating, of course, finally with the chief. And the chief then will say, knock it off, which is ironically exactly what the yam said. Knock it off, right? And then the stool has his final comment, which is obviously ironic. We'll call it humorous, but what makes it funny? Expect the unexpected, and then there's always some kind of message. So now let's get to the 2A part of our story. What exactly is it that you think is the primary message of a story like this? There's been different interpretations. Let's list several. One possible interpretation of this folk tale is the idea that somehow everything is connected. Everything is connected. We're all somehow living in this world together. We think that we're not connected until things start talking. Number 2, the challenge of this folktale is to suggest that we need to begin to see the world from others' perspectives. He goes out to dig up the yam. Doesn't occur to him that the yam might have a perspective. You got me? Now, of course, this is the power of folktales, so let's extrapolate now. The folktale at 2B, that's the power of a folktale. The folktale allows us to take the place of one thing with another thing. In other words, it's easy for even a child to imagine that the yam is being personified and represents another human being. In other words, trying to see the world through another's view, right? That is to say, we're all connected and we're all kind of together. Students at Worland High School, but we rarely think about how other people see us. In your senior year, let's jump to 3A. In your senior year, you're going to do a text by the great Scottish poet Robert Burns, and he writes a poem called To a Lice. And he imagines this question: what would it be like to see the world not through our eyes, but to see the world through somebody else's eyes? In other words, what would it be like for you to be able to see yourself through your friend's eyes? Right? Because we see the world only through our eyes. This interconnectivity then is a powerful idea. Jump to 3A. What for you are other titles that seem to want to teach the same thing. How about this one at 3A? What is your favorite folktale from when you were a child? Where maybe there were talking animals or some other kinds of objects that obviously can't talk, talking birds or something like that. What is your favorite story from when you were a kid where a folktale taught you some kind of lesson, okay, some kind of moral to the story? Finally, at 3B, let's ask this question. This is an interesting little story because it does ask this. Watch this. If there's one person in your life who you would like to be able to see through their eyes and know what they know, who is that person and why? Jot it down really quickly. If you could know another person, their thoughts, their insights, what would that be? And finally, let's end with this question that we've been playing with for our entire Unit 3. Is there a difference between knowing stuff and understanding stuff? Is there a difference between knowledge and wisdom? And what is that difference? Right? What is that difference? Knowledge is stuff you know. Wisdom is how you use the stuff you know. But question, where does wisdom come from? Does it come from learning in school? Does it come from living a certain kind of experience in life? Where do you learn the important stuff that ultimately becomes wisdom? Finally, do you agree that we're all interconnected? You can see this idea, right, as we have studied several of our texts. Somehow we're all kind of connected. We're all interconnected. What you do matters to what I do, and what I do matters to what you do. By the way, jot down, and you can Google this on your own. It's called the butterfly effect. Take a look at it and see what you can learn about this idea of the butterfly effect. Again, the idea that somehow we're all kind of interconnected. Well, this ends our study of unit number 4 in nonfiction. I hope that you've learned one or two new ways to think about reading nonfiction and writing nonfiction for that matter. Thank you.